June 29, 1974, in Darmstadt, West Germany. Admiral Karl Dönitz sat at his desk, the book lying open as he read page 117 of The Ultra-Secret, a memoir recently published and causing a stir in German bookstores. His aged hands held the volume tightly while he perused the translated English text, which was brought to him by an aide. The revelations within those pages contradicted everything he had been convinced of for 3 decades. From May 1940 onward, British intelligence had intercepted and deciphered German naval, army, and Air Force communications almost as quickly as they were transmitted internally. At the age of 83, the last leader of the Third Reich and former commander of Germany's U-boat fleet was left speechless upon reading these details. According to his aide who witnessed the moment, Dönitz appeared pale as he grasped the full extent of what he had just learned. For 30 years after the war's conclusion, Dönitz attributed the defeat of his submarine force to Allied radar superiority and technological advantages. However, this new information was far more crushing. Every order he issued to his U-boats, each tactical innovation, and every last effort to secure victory in the Battle of the Atlantic had been intercepted by British intelligence before even his commanders received them. Ichabadeskin emerge aren't. Dönitz wrote a hasty letter to the book's publisher days after this revelation. But those who knew him recognized that this attempt at self-justification was merely an empty gesture. Throughout the war, whenever subordinates raised security concerns, he had dismissed them with unwavering certainty. "The Enigma cannot be broken," he would often declare. Now seated in his modest apartment near Hamburg, Dönitz felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the deception. With 783 submarines lost and over 30,000 men perishing under Atlantic waters, it was clear that all these tragic events stemmed from a flawed encryption system that had been systematically compromised since the war's 3rd year. The mathematical complexity that supposedly ensured Enigma's security, its 3 times 10 to the power of 114 possible configurations, proved meaningless against Polish mathematicians and British cryptanalysts armed with primitive computing machines unknown to him. Every strategic decision, operational directive, and desperate innovation was transparent to an enemy reading his most secret communications. The confidence of German cryptographers rested on calculations they believed unassailable. The standard Wehrmacht Enigma machine, equipped with 3 rotors, had 17,576 potential rotor positions and 60 distinct rotor arrangements, resulting in over 1 million initial configurations. When the plugboard settings were included, which could vary among 150 trillion, 738 billion, 274,937,250 combinations, the total number of possible setups soared to an astounding 158 quintillion, 962 quadrillion, 555 trillion, 217 billion, 826 million, 349,056. Dr. Erich Huttenheim, who led the OKW/Chef der Wehrmacht/Chiffreabteilung, Wehrmacht Cipher Department, recognized theoretically that breaking Enigma through mathematical analysis was feasible. However, as he recounted to Allied interrogators during the Target Intelligence Committee investigations in 1945, he considered it practically unachievable due to the monumental effort required. This was not an overestimation, but a well-thought-out evaluation based on the technological and resource limitations of the 1930s and early 1940s. Testing every possible Enigma setting would require teams of trained cryptanalysts working non-stop for durations surpassing the age of the universe, according to German estimates. Even with captured machines, solving each day's settings without the daily changing keys provided in safeguarded codebooks was deemed impossible. as it would necessitate thousands of trained operators working around the clock. The Kriegsmarine took further security measures that seemed foolproof. Admiral Dönitz implemented the strictest cryptographic protocols within the German military. Naval Enigma operators underwent rigorous training at the Marine Nachrichtenschule in Flensburg, Mecklenburg, where they spent months learning both technical operations and stringent security procedures intended to make the system invincible. Code books were printed with water-soluble red ink on pink paper that would dissolve within 30 seconds of exposure to water. Special weighted bags ensured materials would sink immediately if thrown overboard. U-boat commanders carried personal sidearms with orders to shoot any crew member who failed to destroy cryptographic materials when capture seemed imminent. The introduction of the four-rotor M4 Enigma machine for U-boats on February 1, 1942, known as Triton by Germans and Shark by Allied cryptanalysts, was seen as the pinnacle of cryptographic security. With 8 rotors to choose from compared to 5 for other services, and the addition of a 4th rotor increasing complexity, the number of possible configurations multiplied significantly. German cryptanalysts at B-Dienst undertook their own security evaluation, called the 100-Day Project, 100-Tage-Arbeit, attempting to break their naval cipher using every known cryptanalytic technique. After all attempts failed completely, Vice Admiral Erhard Merkt reported back to Dönitz with full confidence that their cipher was unbroken. During 1941 and 1942, puzzling trends appeared that should have raised red flags within German naval intelligence. However, each occurrence was downplayed and attributed to British radar capabilities, superior reconnaissance efforts, or mere bad fortune, rather than the possibility of Enigma being compromised. The systematic destruction of German supply ships in the spring of 1941 marked the first significant warning sign that went unaddressed. Between March and June 1941, 7 out of 9 German supply vessels stationed in remote areas of the Atlantic to support surface raiders and U-boats were intercepted and destroyed by the Royal Navy. The Bletchley was discovered on March 3rd, north of the Azores at a distance of 300 miles. On March 5th, the SO Hamburg was found in a secluded bay and sank. Soon after, the Eglund and Nordmark met similar fates. Given their remote locations, it seemed nearly impossible that British patrols would stumble upon these vessels by chance. The vastness of the ocean made accidental discovery statistically improbable. Captain Ludwig Stummel's investigation into these losses concluded that improved radar technology and systematic surveillance were responsible for Britain's successes, without considering the possibility that German position reports had been intercepted. The sinking of Germany's most powerful battleship, the Bismarck, in May 1941 should have prompted further scrutiny. Despite breaking into the Atlantic, it was tracked down with remarkable precision by British forces. When Luftwaffe General Hans Jaschnik received reports indicating that British aircraft knew precisely where to search vast areas of the Norwegian Sea and North Atlantic, he dismissed security concerns outright. He declared it impossible for enemy forces to read their ciphers, a belief shared by naval intelligence experts. Yet nowhere was this hidden crisis more apparent than in the Battle of the Atlantic, where U-boat losses steadily increased from late 1941 onwards despite tactical adjustments and technological advancements. On January 12, 1942, Dönitz noted his confusion in his war diary over the interception of supply submarine Humanus 459 at an extremely remote location, 800 nautical miles west of Freetown. His inquiry to Berlin received a standard response from naval intelligence. Our cipher remained a closely guarded secret, unaffected by external influences. Statistical evidence revealed a pattern of destruction that conventional reasoning couldn't explain. In 1941, Germany lost 35 U-boats. By 1942, Despite introducing the fourth rotor into Enigma machines, losses escalated to 85. This trend continued through 1943, with an astounding 237 submarines destroyed in a single year. May of that same year saw 41 U-boats sunk, a period known as Black May by German submariners, accounting for over one-third of the operational fleet. Despite these staggering figures, German analysts offered alternative explanations. When convoys exhibited improbable evasion tactics and dodged wolf packs with eerie precision, Dönitz attributed this to Allied aircraft equipped with advanced radar systems. Similarly, when U-boats were frequently spotted on the surface, German scientists suggested that British forces had developed radar capable of detecting submarines up to 60 nautical miles away. A technological impossibility at the time, but more plausible than admitting a cryptographic breach. As losses mounted, increasingly rigorous investigations by German intelligence failed to uncover any signs of compromise due to their steadfast belief in Enigma's invincibility. The most critical investigation began following the capture of UMNS 570 by British forces on August 27, 1941. The submarine had surrendered after sustaining damage south of Iceland and might have been seized with intact cryptographic materials. Captain Ludwig Stummel of B. Dienst was tasked with assessing the security implications. His exhaustive inquiry involved interviewing survivors, analyzing intercepted messages, and reconstructing the sequence of events leading to UMNS 570's capture. In his October 1941 report, Stummel acknowledged that if the British had obtained an undamaged Enigma machine along with code books, they could theoretically decipher German naval communications. However, he swiftly dismissed this possibility, concluding that there was no justification for alarm regarding a potential compromise of our cryptographic operations. His argument was based on what appeared to be flawless logic. According to this line of thinking, even if the British had acquired both the machine and the current keys, they would lose access to this capability once the keys were changed on November 1st. Additionally, standard procedure required the destruction of all cryptographic materials, which it was reasonable to assume the crew had followed. What Stummel was unaware of was that UMNS 110 had been seized intact back in May 9, 1941, giving the British possession not only of an Enigma machine, but also critical code books and operational guidelines. The boarding party from HMS Bulldog, headed by Sub-Lieutenant David Bomme, discovered the submarine's radio room untouched with code books scattered on the table, and the Enigma machine still warm from recent use. Among the confiscated items were settings for high-level officer-only signals, along with the short signal code books known as Kriegsmarine, which revealed how Germans compressed messages to evade Allied direction-finding efforts. The investigation that should have uncovered everything came in spring 1943, spurred by the devastating losses during Black May. Admiral Dönitz, desperate to comprehend why his wolf packs were being systematically decimated, ordered an exhaustive security review. The team, led by Corvette and Captain Meticulous, thoroughly examined multiple hypotheses with meticulous detail. Their initial theory centered around the METOX radar warning receivers carried by U-boats. German scientists speculated that these devices might inadvertently transmit signals that betrayed submarine positions. A Fokker-Wulf 200 Condor aircraft equipped with detection equipment confirmed that METOX emissions could indeed be detected up to 110 kilometers away, prompting an immediate order for all U-boats to cease using radar detection gear. As losses continued unabated, the investigation shifted to another theory. Perhaps Allied forces had developed infrared detection systems capable of identifying submarine heat signatures. In response, German naval technical departments launched a crash program to create special infrared-absorbing paint, and returning U-boats were hastily repainted with this experimental coating. Despite these efforts, losses continued to mount. The breakthrough finally came when an intact H-2S radar system from a crashed RAF bomber near Rotterdam was recovered on February 3, 1943. German scientists were astounded to discover that the British had developed centimetric radar operating at wavelengths undetectable by their equipment. This revelation prompted another crash program to develop new detection gear, with the first Naxos radar detectors reaching U-boats in September 1943. During these investigations, a particular hypothesis was notably neglected. According to Admiral Erhard Martin's 1941 assessment, as head of Naval Intelligence Service, breaking Enigma would necessitate an improbable sequence of events. Capturing machines and current keys, deciphering security protocols, solving officer-only signals, and having enough time for cryptanalysis before the keys were updated. He concluded that each step alone was highly unlikely, let alone all occurring together being practically impossible. Ironically, Germany's success in cracking Allied codes bolstered their confidence in Enigma's security. The Naval Intelligence Service had achieved remarkable successes by breaking British naval ciphers used for convoy communications. By December 1942, Captain Heinz Bonatz of the English language section was deciphering around 80% of intercepted British convoy messages within hours of transmission. Wilhelm Trano, Germany's leading naval cryptanalyst, could predict convoy movements with accuracy ranging from 10 to 20 hours ahead, allowing U-boats to position themselves effectively for interception. This success fostered a dangerous psychological dynamic among German intelligence officers. Given the significant efforts and specialized talent required to break codes, they reasoned that if BD Enst employed over 5,000 personnel at its peak, then similar or greater challenges must face the British in attacking Enigma. They were aware from experience that even with captured code books, continuous access to enemy communications demanded constant vigilance and frequent setbacks when codes changed. What they failed to realize was that while celebrating their ability to read British convoy routes, the British were intercepting virtually everything else. U-boat positions, patrol orders, supply arrangements, tactical innovations, and personal assessments sent to Hitler. The Germans were winning tactical victories, but losing the strategic war, as their successes blinded them to this strategic catastrophe. The supreme irony unfolded in spring 1943 when BD Enst's success inadvertently accelerated Germany's defeat. By reading British convoy communications, Trano could position wolf packs with pinpoint accuracy. However, the British, having decoded both German positioning orders and their own compromised messages, knew precisely where the U-boats were assembling. Convoys were redirected to circumvent wolf packs, while hunter-killer teams were dispatched straight toward lurking submarines. The Germans celebrated cracking enemy codes, only to find themselves ensnared in meticulously set traps. Captain Heinz Bonatz later reflected on his suspicions from late 1943 in unpublished memoirs, noting the enemy's inexplicable awareness of their positions. Convoy courses would change at the last minute, always just beyond patrol lines. Supply submarines were intercepted at distant refueling stations. It felt as though they had insight into every move made by U-boats. Despite raising these concerns, he was assured repeatedly that Enigma's security was mathematically unbreakable. The protection of Ultra, the code name for intelligence derived from broken German codes, marked one of history's most effective deception operations. Winston Churchill famously referred to Bletchley Park as a goose that laid golden eggs, but never cackled. Recognizing the strategic edge gained from reading enemy communications outweighed any tactical benefits from specific intelligence. The security protocols surrounding Ultra were unprecedented in their scope and efficacy. In 1940, Group Captain Frederick Winterbotham, appointed by the Secret Intelligence Service Chief Stuart Menzies, established the Special Liaison Unit, SLU, system. These units, which eventually numbered 40 globally, maintained strict control over the distribution of ultra-intelligence. Each SLU officer was personally vetted by Winterbotham and signed a pledge under the Official Secrets Act, with treason punishable even after the war's end. Security measures at Bletchley Park were extreme, with its 580-acre estate surrounded by military police posts and over 9,000 personnel operating in complete compartmentalization. Codebreakers in Hut 8 focused solely on naval Enigma without knowing about work done in Hut 6 on Fairmark traffic. Even within huts, personnel were aware only of their specific tasks. A translator might spend years converting German messages to English without understanding the source or significance. To conceal the origin of ultra-intelligence, Britain devised increasingly sophisticated deceptions. The initial cover story revolved around a fictional network of super spy agents, known as Boniface, allegedly operated by an anti-Nazi German officer stationed in Berlin with access to top-secret communications. When deploying ultra-intelligence, the British would often carry out false reconnaissance flights to create believable scenarios for their deceptions. After utilizing this intelligence to destroy an Italian convoy headed for North Africa, they broadcast a radio message in a cipher known to be compromised by the Germans, expressing gratitude to a fictitious agent in Naples for the crucial information. The most intricate deception entailed meticulously balancing actions and non-actions. Commander Roger Wynn's Operational Intelligence Unit at the Admiralty crafted detailed guidelines for employing ultra-intelligence. They timed attacks on new submarines to coincide with plausible detection opportunities like aircraft sightings or surface ship encounters. When Ultra revealed refueling rendezvous points for U-boats, the British delayed their strikes until the submarines had been together long enough for any discovery to seem coincidental. Sometimes preserving the secrecy of ultra-intelligence required accepting significant losses. On November 14, 1940, German bombers severely damaged Coventry during a raid that claimed 568 civilian lives. Post-war lore suggested Churchill knew from Enigma decrypts that Coventry was targeted, but chose not to evacuate the city to protect Ultra's secrecy. However, declassified documents reveal a more nuanced reality. While Enigma had revealed Operation Moonlight Sonata was planned and initially indicated 5 potential targets, radio beam navigation confirmed Coventry as the target just hours before the raid, prompting immediate defensive measures such as fighter patrols and anti-aircraft reinforcements. The tale of Churchill's sacrifice was itself a post-war fabrication to obscure the true capabilities and limitations of ultra-intelligence. On March 25, 1941, at Hartmanus 8 in Bletchley Park, Mavis Lever, later Beatty, sat hunched over intercepted Italian naval messages, working long hours to decipher the variant of Enigma used by the Italian Navy. She suddenly saw the patterns emerge. The decoded message was electrifying in its implications. Today is March 25 and marks day -3 for the start of the operation. Mavis immediately grasped the significance. 3 days prior to a major operation, the Italian fleet was gearing up for a significant endeavor. Working tirelessly throughout the night alongside Margaret Rock, she deciphered additional messages that unveiled the entire battle plan of the Italians. According to these decoded communications, Admiral Angelo Iacchino would lead the battleship Vittorio Veneto, along with 6 heavy cruisers and 17 destroyers, on an attack against British convoys traveling between Egypt and Greece. This intelligence was swiftly relayed to Admiral Andrew Cunningham, who commanded the British Mediterranean Fleet in Alexandria. Cunningham, a dramatic leader well-versed in the art of deception, spent March 27th conspicuously playing golf at the Alexandria Sporting Club, ensuring Italian spies would report no signs of readiness among the British forces. That evening, after returning to his flagship HMS Warspite with an air of nonchalance, he ordered his fleet to set sail. Unaware that they were sailing into a meticulously planned trap, the Italian fleet proceeded undeterred. The first strike came from British torpedo bombers launched from HMS Formidable, causing substantial damage to Vittorio Veneto and severely damaging heavy cruiser Pola. Later, when Italian cruisers Zara and Fiume returned under cover of darkness to assist the crippled Pola, they found themselves facing Cunningham's battleships at point-blank range. Within minutes, both cruisers along with 2 destroyers were obliterated. More than 24-0 Italian sailors lost their lives in this engagement, including Admiral Carlo Caternaro and the captains of all 3 destroyed cruisers. Surviving aboard the damaged Vittorio Veneto, Admiral Iacchino attributed the disaster to British radar superiority and fortunate reconnaissance efforts. In his after-action report, he stated that the enemy's ability to track their movements must be credited to advanced aerial surveillance and radar technology. Neither Italian nor German intelligence ever considered the possibility that the British had been decrypting their naval orders for days leading up to this battle. The psychological ramifications were profound, shaking Axis naval strategy. Hitler, already doubtful about surface naval warfare following the loss of Graf Spee, viewed Matapan as further evidence that control over the Mediterranean was firmly in British hands. Consequently, the Italian fleet ceased all major offensive operations. On May 18, 1941, at precisely 23:30 hours, a teleprinter at Bletchley Park sounded off with an intercepted German naval communication. At just 21 years old and a Cambridge undergraduate turned cryptanalyst, Harry Hinsley immediately grasped the importance of an intercepted message from Admiral Gunter Lutjent aboard the battleship Bismarck. The dispatch reported that the vessel had departed Gortenhafen, now known as Gdynia, and was en route to Operation Rhinobong, a planned commerce raiding mission in the Atlantic. British intelligence had been preparing for this eventuality for months. The Bismarck posed an immense threat to Allied convoys since the start of the war, with its powerful 800 and 15mm guns and sophisticated fire control systems capable of outmatching any cruiser and outrunning any battleship that could engage it. Should it reach the Atlantic shipping lanes, the ensuing destruction would be unprecedented. Fortunately, thanks to ultra-intelligence, the Royal Navy was forewarned and had time to mobilize its forces. Admiral John Tovey positioned the home fleet for interception, while Force H under Vice Admiral James Somerville moved north from Gibraltar. HMS Norfolk and HMS Suffolk were stationed in the Denmark Strait with orders to shadow Bismarck using their Type 284 radar systems. Every maneuver was meticulously coordinated based on intercepted German communications. On May 23, when Bismarck was first spotted in the Denmark Strait by HMS Suffolk, the British claimed it was a fortunate reconnaissance sighting. In reality, ultra-intelligence had provided not only the route, but also the exact schedule of the battleship's movements. Although the subsequent battle that led to the sinking of HMS Hood was a tactical blow for Britain, strategic victory was already within reach. Bismarck sustained damage and began leaking oil, while radar-equipped shadowers kept track of its position through ongoing Enigma intercepts. On May 25, Admiral Gunter Lutjent made a critical mistake by transmitting a lengthy radio message to Naval Group West about Bismarck's condition and plans. This broadcast lasted over half an hour, giving British direction-finding stations ample time to pinpoint the battleship's location. Crucially, Ultra decrypted this transmission within hours at Bletchley Park, revealing that Bismarck was heading towards the French port of Brest and lacked sufficient fuel for evasive maneuvers. The final chapter unfolded with grim certainty as Catalina flying boats accidentally located Bismarck precisely where Ultra had predicted it would be. Despite operating in terrible weather conditions beyond their operational range, Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Ark Royal managed to deliver a critical hit that jammed Bismarck's rudder. On May 27, the British battleships HMS King George V and HMS Rodney engaged the Bismarck early in the morning, reducing it to scrap metal. Out of the 21 German sailors on board, only 114 survived. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, who commanded the Kriegsmarine, reviewed the incident with increasing frustration. How had the British managed to maintain contact across vast stretches of ocean? And how did they manage to amass such a formidable force at just the right moment? His investigation revealed that British naval aviation and radar technology had surpassed German expectations. The possibility that the British might have intercepted his orders never crossed his mind. In his memoirs, composed years before the true story came to light, Raeder attributed the loss to mechanical failure and an unexpected torpedo strike by the enemy. He remained unaware that luck played no role in their defeat. In May 1943, Admiral Dönitz commanded the largest U-boat fleet ever assembled, comprising 116 submarines patrolling the North Atlantic. Organized into wolf packs with names such as Fink, Finch, Amsel, Blackbird, Miser, Tit, and Star, these vessels were poised for a decisive victory. German B-Dienst cryptanalysts had cracked British convoy codes, leading Dönitz to believe that his fleet was on the verge of triumph. In his war diary dated May 1, he noted signs of enemy exhaustion, predicting that one more concentrated effort would sever the Atlantic supply line. Unbeknownst to Dönitz, Bletchley Park had made a significant cryptanalytic breakthrough that would determine the fate of his fleet. After a 10-month gap caused by the introduction of the four-rotor Enigma machine, British codebreakers successfully decrypted messages using captured codebooks from Humanus 559 and Colossus, the world's first programmable electronic computer. They were reading German naval communications within hours of transmission. The pattern for the ensuing carnage was set in the first convoy battle of May. On April 28, Humanus 650 spotted convoy on S5, which consisted of 42 merchant ships en route from Liverpool to Halifax. Dönitz dispatched 3 wolf packs comprising a total of 41 submarines to attack the convoy. Aware of his every move, the British Admiralty reinforced the escort and deployed additional forces to intercept. The conflict spanned 6 days and covered 600 miles of ocean, during which German submarines managed to sink 13 merchant ships but suffered severe losses themselves. 7 U-boats were lost to the escort vessels defending the convoys. Among them was Humanus 192, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Werner Happy, which was destroyed by HMS Loosterreif after being depth-charged. Another submarine, Humanus 638, went down with all hands after colliding with HMS Sunflower. Soon after, U-boats numbered 125, 531, 438, 630, and 528 also met their fate in rapid succession. For the first time during the war, the Allies enjoyed a favorable exchange rate, though this victory was merely the start of more successes to come. As May progressed, each convoy battle turned into a devastating blow for German submarines. By studying deployment orders, Allied forces navigated convoys through gaps in patrol lines and directed hunter-killer groups straight towards assembly points where wolf packs were forming. Aircraft equipped with Lee lights spotted U-boats charging batteries on the surface at night. Meanwhile, ships armed with Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars achieved kill rates that amazed even their own commanders. Convoy HX-237 crossing in mid-May destroyed 3 submarines without losing any merchant vessels. Similarly, Convoy SC-130 sank 5 submarines while sustaining no losses of its own. The new escort carrier USS Boog, operating with precise intelligence from Ultra, managed to sink 6 U-boats over the course of 6 weeks. German submarine losses were mounting at an alarming rate, surpassing their ability to replace them. Experienced commanders who had endured years of combat found themselves perishing in waters they once controlled. The statistics painted a grim picture. In May 1943, Germany lost 41 U-boats, nearly 25% of its operational fleet. 7 were destroyed by aircraft in the Bay of Biscay while attempting to leave or return to base. 6 additional submarines were caught refueling from submarine tankers at coordinates revealed through ultra-intelligence. 12 more fell victim to convoy escorts that appeared to predict their every move. The youngest casualty was UMNS 209, which met its fate on May 7th during its inaugural patrol, taking all 50 crew members with it. The most seasoned boat was UMNS 192, whose commander had endured 12 previous missions before being sunk on May 6th. On May 24th, Dönitz issued an order signaling the de facto conclusion of the Battle of the Atlantic. All submarines were directed to evacuate the North Atlantic convoy routes and regroup in waters southwest of the Azores. In his war diary, he wrote that they had lost the battle due to Allied radar and aircraft, without realizing that their own communications had inadvertently led to the demise of their fleet. One of the most fascinating aspects of this highly secretive operation was how narrowly the Germans came to uncover the truth, only to be misled by Allied intelligence efforts. The most complex deception involved the Lucy Ring, a Soviet spy network based in Switzerland that appeared to have unparalleled access to German military secrets. Rudolf Rössler, code-named Lucy, was a German refugee living in Lucerne who operated an independent intelligence service. From 1942 onward, Lucy supplied Soviet intelligence with remarkably accurate data about German operations, especially on the Eastern Front. His reports included detailed Wehrmacht order of battle and offensive strategies, even verbatim copies of Hitler's operational directives, so precise and timely that both sides suspected they originated from high-ranking officials within the Wehrmacht. German counterintelligence conducted numerous investigations into the Lucy Ring, convinced they had a significant traitor in their leadership. The Abwehr and Gestapo interrogated several senior officers with access to Enigma communications, without discovering that Lucy's information stemmed not from betrayal, but from Bletchley Park, which funneled it through Swiss intelligence to mask its actual origin. The British encountered a delicate dilemma. While Soviet forces urgently required ultra-intelligence to counter German offensives, Stalin harbored deep suspicions about British intentions and was unlikely to trust intelligence from capitalist allies. Furthermore, directly sharing Ultra with the Soviets posed risks due to their less secure communication channels and potential German spies within Soviet intelligence. To address this issue, a sophisticated solution was devised. Selective ultra-intelligence was transmitted to Swiss intelligence, which then relayed it to Rössler under the guise of originating from anti-Nazi Wehrmacht officers. Rössler subsequently passed it on to Soviet intelligence through his handler, Alexander Rado. The Soviets felt confident acting on their intelligence, which they believed came from an independent source not shared by the Western Allies. Meanwhile, the Germans, upon verifying Lucy's reports through their own agents, initiated investigations that ultimately led nowhere near Bletchley Park. Throughout 1943 and 1944, a significant amount of evidence indicated Allied knowledge at levels bordering on indisputable certainty. Nevertheless, German investigators, anchored in the belief that Enigma was secure, consistently found alternative explanations for these findings. The systematic destruction of supply submarines for U-boats provided perhaps the clearest proof. These milk cow submarines operated from secret refueling points in remote areas of the Atlantic Ocean, their positions known only to U-boat command, and the specific submarines scheduled for resupply. Between June and August 1943, 10 out of 14 supply submarines were destroyed. Most were caught during refueling operations at predetermined coordinates. For instance, on July 24th, UMNS 459 was sunk while refueling UMNS 117, which occurred 500 miles away from the nearest shipping lane. Similarly, on August 4th, UMNS 489 was intercepted and destroyed at a location that had been communicated just 2 days earlier. Herman Moore, who investigated these losses for naval intelligence, noted in his report, "The likelihood of random discovery of our supply operations is mathematically negligible. Either the enemy has advanced detection capabilities beyond our understanding, or there is a severe breach of security." However, his investigation focused exclusively on potential human intelligence sources, such as crew members who might have been compromised and neutral sailors who could have observed departure patterns. He even considered the possibility that Allied agents with radio transmitters near French bases were responsible. Similarly, when Germany introduced acoustic torpedoes in September 1943, designed to home in on convoy escort propellers, the Allies swiftly deployed noise-making devices towed behind escorts to decoy these torpedoes. The Germans concluded that the Allies must have captured sample torpedoes from destroyed U-boats as a means of developing effective countermeasures. In another instance, when U-boats began using new Curia-burst radio transmissions in 1944, compressing messages into less than half a second to evade direction finding, the Allies continued to locate and attack submarines with remarkable accuracy. The German explanation was that the Allies had developed advanced direction-finding equipment capable of detecting even these brief communications. Captain Yock Tado, the Japanese naval attaché stationed in Berlin, made one of the most revealing observations. Following an analysis of Allied operations in 1944, he reported back to Tokyo that the accuracy of enemy intelligence suggested they were intercepting German communications. This seemed unlikely given the stringent security measures in place, but no other explanation could account for the available evidence. When American cryptanalysts intercepted and decoded his report, it initially raised concerns at Bletchley Park. Fortunately, German naval intelligence dismissed Yock's worries as mere excuses to cover up their own failures in the Pacific. Admiral Karl Dönitz stands out as a tragic figure in the narrative of German cryptographic oversight. Renowned for his tactical brilliance and inspiring leadership, Dönitz's very expertise became an obstacle to acknowledging the reality. His centralized command system, which he viewed as his greatest innovation, ultimately led to his fleet's downfall. Through his BOFA tactics, Dönitz revolutionized submarine warfare by centralizing tactical control from his headquarters in Lorient, Paris, and eventually Berlin. Every U-boat commander was required to report their position, fuel status, torpedo inventory, and contact reports. From these situation rooms, Dönitz orchestrated attacks like a conductor directing an orchestra, maneuvering boats onto convoys with precise timing and positioning. This extensive system of constant radio communication enabled Bletchley Park to monitor every U-boat in the Atlantic. Dönitz transmitted over 70 radio messages daily to his fleet, each intercepted and decoded by British cryptanalysts. His detailed orders revealed not only current positions, but also future plans, patrol patterns, and tactical innovations. Despite this, Dönitz's confidence in his system remained unwavering. When subordinates questioned the wisdom of such extensive radio traffic, he responded with intricate technical explanations. He maintained that the Enigma machine was unbreakable by computational standards, and that German radio discipline was unparalleled in naval history, employing short signal code books to compress messages for better direction-finding evasion. Alterations to frequencies and call signs hindered traffic analysis. Deeply rooted in his belief was the conviction that Germany's technological prowess ensured security. His war diary paints a picture of growing frustration over baffling Allied pressures while steadfastly maintaining his core beliefs without doubt. Each entry details convoys taking unlikely evasive maneuvers, escorts appearing in improbable locations, and aircraft intercepting U-boats at unexpected times. Despite these observations, he remained consistent in his conclusions. The Allies possessed more aircraft, better radar technology, and superior resources. Yet he never wrote down what was obvious, namely, that their communications were being intercepted. His psychological commitment to his command system prevented him from recognizing this fact. To admit that the Enigma code had been compromised would imply that his entire innovative approach to submarine warfare, which had earned him Hitler's favor as a successor, was fundamentally flawed. The realization that every order he gave, every tactical innovation he developed, and each U-boat he sent on missions were transparent to the enemy would have been devastating. Even after the war, before the disclosure of ultra-secrets, Dönitz maintained unwavering confidence in his wartime decisions. In his memoirs published in 1958, he attributed U-boat losses to Allied material superiority and technological advancements, without acknowledging that even 3,000 submarines would have been ineffective if the Allies continued reading every command. On May 9, 1946, at the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg, Admiral Karl Dönitz stood before the dock defending his conduct of submarine warfare against Allied prosecutors. In his testimony that day, unbeknownst to him, he inadvertently revealed the extent of Germany's ignorance about Ultra while simultaneously illustrating how close he had come to uncovering the truth. The Allies' superiority in locating German submarines was undeniable, Dönitz stated. By 1943, our losses were unsustainable, and I was compelled to retreat from the convoy routes. When questioned by prosecutors about specific incidents, Dönitz's responses consistently sidestepped the underlying cause. Regarding the destruction of supply submarines at distant coordinates, he claimed we suspected that the enemy had developed new long-range detection equipment, possibly using infrared or other undetectable emissions. We also explored the possibility of traitors, but found no evidence to support it. When asked about convoys that seemed to evade wolf packs with remarkable accuracy, Dönitz explained that the enemy's air reconnaissance had reached saturation levels, allowing near-constant surveillance over vast ocean expanses. Combined with their radar capabilities, they could track our movements and reroute convoys accordingly. The prosecution, aware of Ultra but bound by confidentiality until 1971, pressed Dönitz on specific intelligence failures without revealing the source. They questioned him about the interception of Humanus 459 at precise refueling points, the destruction of wolf packs during assembly phases, and the rapid failure of every major tactical innovation once implemented. To each question, Dönitz provided technical explanations such as high-frequency direction finding, centimetric radar, TBS, talk between ships, systems, radio coordination among escort groups, air-to-surface vessel radar, magnetic anomaly detection equipment, and sonar buoys. While these technologies existed and were employed, none addressed the fundamental intelligence advantage that made their application so devastating. The most revealing exchange came when prosecutors Sir David Maxwell Fyfe asked Dönitz about his investigations into security breaches. Admiral, did you ever suspect your communications might have been compromised? I investigated this possibility multiple times. Our cryptographic experts assured me that Enigma was mathematically secure and breaking it would require resources beyond any nation's capacity. Yet our losses continued to rise. Yes, but these losses were due to enemy technological superiority rather than intelligence failures. They had radar capable of detecting a periscope at 20 miles, aircraft that could appear without warning, and weapons systems we couldn't counter. You never suspected they might be intercepting your radio traffic. Our communications were safeguarded by an encryption system that was considered the pinnacle of technological sophistication at the time. The theory you propose was rigorously scrutinized and ultimately dismissed by our most brilliant mathematicians. Reflecting back, it is particularly striking how intelligent Dönitz was, along with his exceptional analytical skills. He had scored a remarkable 138 on an IQ test, placing him well within the range of gifted individuals. He accurately pinpointed numerous Allied capabilities and breakthroughs, and consistently posed incisive questions while insisting on thorough investigations. However, a deep-seated belief in Enigma's impenetrability created an insurmountable mental barrier that prevented any reconsideration. One of the most damning instances of German institutional blindness occurred on August 10, 1943, when Swiss intelligence, known for its neutrality and reliability, issued a clear warning via diplomatic channels to Admiral Karl Dönitz of the WWII. According to the report, Allied forces had succeeded in cracking Germany's naval codes, allowing them to read all operational orders sent to U-boats. Despite this alarming information, the German response revealed just how firmly entrenched their faith in Enigma's security was. Upon learning about the Swiss warning on August 13, Dönitz documented his reaction in his war diary. A report from Switzerland claims that the enemy can decipher our codes. This is inconceivable. Instead of taking immediate action, he ordered another security review, one destined to reach predetermined conclusions. The committee tasked with investigating this matter was led by Corvette and Captain Meticulous. They disregarded the Swiss intelligence as a disinformation campaign aimed at eroding German confidence in their communications. The rationale behind the committee's dismissal was revealing. If the Allies could indeed read Germany's naval communications, why hadn't they achieved even more devastating successes? Why did some convoys still run into wolf packs without prior knowledge of their positions? Why did U-boats occasionally manage to evade hunter-killer groups? The reasons for this phenomenon were straightforward. The Allies deliberately tolerated certain losses to protect their secrets, a strategy that the Germans found hard to comprehend. German counterintelligence also examined the origins of information coming from Switzerland, concluding it must have been disseminated by Allied agents aiming to sow discord within the German naval command. They never seriously considered the possibility that Swiss intelligence had simply observed clear evidence of foreknowledge in Allied operations. The Germans struggled to understand Bletchley Park's capabilities because they could not envision the technological and organizational advancements necessary for large-scale code breaking. German cryptanalysts relied on paper, pencils, and mechanical calculators, while electronic computation machines capable of testing thousands of Enigma settings per hour were purely speculative at that time. By 1944, Bletchley Park had become a pioneering industrial-scale computing center. Tommy Flowers designed the Colossus machine, which could process 5,000 characters per second, speeds unimaginable to German mathematicians. Bomb machines, developed by Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman from Polish Designs, could test over 17,000 Enigma positions in just 20 minutes, a task that would take human cryptanalysts months. The organizational structure at Bletchley Park was equally remarkable. By 1945, it employed nearly 9,000 people, including a workforce of women who operated the machines, transcribed intercepts, and managed extensive filing systems tracking millions of decoded messages. The facility worked around the clock, with 3 shifts processing over 3,000 intercepted messages daily at peak capacity. U-boat communications received top priority for naval intelligence. The systematic approach to cryptanalysis employed by Bletchley Park would have astonished German experts. Every Enigma message ever decrypted was meticulously filed and cross-referenced, allowing them to catalog patterns in operator behavior such as lazy operators using girlfriends' names as message keys or predictable weather reports providing cribs. Standard military phrases in routine communications were also closely monitored. The British had mechanized a process that Germans still regarded as an art form. Later, German cryptanalysts expressed amazement at the resources allocated to Chinese letter, ENIGM, Chinese letter TYKOM, Chinese letter 1945, Chinese letter, ERICH, umlaut TT, ENH, NE, Chinese letter, 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 H, umlaut TT, ENH, NE, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. 1943, Chinese letter, 11 Chinese letter, 30 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. LUFTWAFFE, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, HAUPTM, A, NN Wilhelm DOMMIS, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 UMI, NU, S391, Humanist 200, and 38 Chinese letter U, 648 Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. 11 Chinese letter, 28 Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. D-O-M, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. 144 Chinese letter 6 Chinese letter 6 Chinese letter 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 Chinese letter. Despite the massive scale of the largest amphibious invasion in history, which involved more than 6,000 vessels and an initial landing force of over 150,000 troops, German defenses were utterly unprepared. The ability to maintain tactical surprise, despite the strategic impossibility of achieving it, highlighted the overwhelming dominance of Allied intelligence capabilities. Thanks to Ultra, the Allies had access to all critical information that German commanders shared among themselves. This included detailed assessments by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt and defensive orders issued by Rommel, which were often decoded at Bletchley Park before they reached their intended recipients in Germany. Consequently, the Allies could design deception operations with pinpoint accuracy. Operation Fortitude, a deceptive campaign designed to convince German forces that the main invasion would occur near Pas-de-Calais, succeeded because the Allies could monitor and respond to German intelligence feedback through ultra-intercepts in real time. When German intelligence reported significant Allied troop movements opposite Calais, which were actually inflatable tanks and fabricated radio signals, the Allies adjusted their tactics accordingly based on intercepted communications. Each time German commanders expressed doubt, the Allies provided new evidence to strengthen the deception. Even after D-Day commenced, ultra-decrypts continued to show that German high command still believed Normandy was merely a diversionary attack. This misconception delayed Hitler's decision to release panzer reserves from Calais for 7 critical weeks, partly due to intelligence assessments influenced by Allied manipulation and deception operations. Instead of being prepared, the German military was essentially fighting against an enemy who had complete insight into their plans. Admiral Theodor Krank, commander of Naval Group West, later wrote about the intelligence failure during the invasion. "We knew nothing. Our reconnaissance was blindfolded, our intelligence deaf. The enemy appeared out of nowhere with overwhelming force." In reality, it wasn't that German forces knew nothing. They faced an adversary who possessed comprehensive knowledge of their inner workings. By late 1944, accumulating discrepancies should have alerted Germans to potential weaknesses in their communication security protocols. U-boats equipped with snorkel technology for extended underwater operations were still being detected at alarming rates, and new acoustic torpedoes had been counteracted before they could be effectively deployed. Even tactical innovations were swiftly countered by Allied adaptations. Despite these anomalies, German investigations continued to propose alternative explanations rather than addressing the root cause of their intelligence failure. Investigators attributed the destruction of snorkel boats to enhanced Allied sonar and magnetic anomaly detectors. When wolf pack tactics faltered, they speculated that this was due to overwhelming Allied air power in their operational zones. The consistent interception of supply operations led them to hypothesize about infrared detection of diesel exhaust or high-altitude visibility of wake patterns. A critical incident occurred in March 1945 when UMNS 866 was destroyed near the American coast shortly after leaving Norway. Despite maintaining radio silence and using only snorkel technology on a route known solely by U-boat command, its precise location suggested that detection without communications intelligence would have been unlikely. However, German investigators concluded that dense Allied hunter-killer groups off their coastline had made detection unavoidable. Captain Gunter Hesseler, son-in-law of Dönitz and chief of U-boat operations, seemed closest to the truth during a staff meeting in April 1945, when he reportedly said either the Americans possessed technology beyond our comprehension or were reading our thoughts. Admiral Gott, Dönitz's chief of staff, swiftly dismissed such defeatist thinking, asserting that their communications remained secure. In May 1945, as the Third Reich crumbled, Allied intelligence teams rushed across Germany in Operation Typhoon to capture German cryptographic personnel and materials before they could be destroyed or fall into Soviet hands. The findings revealed a blend of sophisticated cryptanalytic capabilities, alongside a remarkable unawareness of their own vulnerabilities. Dr. Eric Huttenheim, chief cryptanalyst of OKW/G, provided crucial insights during interrogations. When informed that the Allies had been decoding Enigma traffic since 1940, his initial reaction was disbelief. Impossible, he declared, citing the mathematical complexity as insurmountable. Seeing actual decoded messages left him utterly shocked. However, this endeavor would necessitate an unimaginable number of individuals and resources. When interrogators detailed the scope of Bletchley Park's activities, Huttenheim's reaction highlighted a significant gap in comprehension that safeguarded Ultra's secrecy. We estimated that cracking Enigma would demand more assets than any nation could reasonably allocate to cryptanalysis. It never occurred to us that you would prioritize it equally with building aircraft or training divisions. Wilhelm Trano, an exceptional B-Dienst cryptanalyst who cracked British convoy codes, was equally astonished. During his TICOM interrogation, he confessed, "We sensed something amiss but dismissed our concerns as paranoia." Breaking Enigma was deemed mathematically impossible. Interrogations of lower-ranking staff exposed widespread suspicions that were consistently suppressed. Radio operators noted patterns indicative of Allied foreknowledge, while U-boat commanders questioned how convoys always seemed to evade them at the right moments. Intelligence analysts documented statistical improbabilities in Allied successes. At every level, these concerns were dismissed with the same refrain: Enigma cannot be broken. Perhaps most revealing was the testimony of Corvette and Captain Heinz Bonatz, former head of B-Dienst. When informed about Ultra, he sat silently for several minutes before stating, "From the moment you broke Enigma, the war was lost." The battles, tactics, and sacrifices that followed were merely delays. The ultra-secret remained safeguarded under the Official Secrets Act until 1974. Constituting one of the most successful security operations in intelligence history. Over 10,000 individuals who worked at Bletchley Park maintained their silence for nearly 3 decades. Upon returning to civilian life, they struggled to account for the gaps in their employment records and were barred from discussing their wartime experiences, even with family members. Moreover, they were compelled to endure distorted historical narratives without being able to set the record straight. The maintenance of secrecy served various objectives. In the aftermath of World War II, British and American intelligence agencies employed captured Enigma machines to establish secure communications with emerging nations, under the guise of providing cutting-edge encryption technology. Crucially, techniques honed at Bletchley Park were still being utilized against Soviet communications during the Cold War. Disclosing these methods could have jeopardized ongoing operations. The personal toll of this enforced silence was substantial. Exceptional cryptanalysts returned to academia without acknowledgement for their pioneering work in computer science and mathematics. Women who had operated bombs and Colossus machines, laying the groundwork for the digital age, were unable to claim recognition for their achievements. Veterans from Bletchley Park encountered skepticism regarding their wartime service, unable to provide specifics about their contributions. Gordon Welchman, inventor of the diagonal board modification that greatly enhanced the effectiveness of the bombs, moved to the United States and engaged in classified research. When he published his memoir, The Hut 6 Story, in 1982, he faced potential prosecution under the Official Secrets Act, even though most ultra information had been declassified by then. Welchman passed away in 1985, having only recently received due credit for innovations that contributed to winning the war, but still facing official disapproval for revealing operational details. The dam broke in 1974 when Group Captain F.W. Winterbotham released the ultra-secret. Winterbotham, who had overseen special liaison units responsible for disseminating ultra-intelligence, had long fought to tell his story. His motivations were multifaceted: personal vindication, historical accuracy, and concern that valuable lessons about intelligence and warfare were being forgotten. The book's publication caused a stir in the historical community and among surviving German military leaders. Historians suddenly needed to revise their entire understanding of World War II. Battles previously attributed to strategic brilliance or fortunate reconnaissance were revealed as results of intelligence operations. Allied commanders who had appeared prescient were shown to have been reading enemy communications. The news was profoundly upsetting for German veterans. According to reports, General Adolf Galland, a former Luftwaffe fighter commander, stated that he had been puzzled for 3 decades about how the Allies always seemed to anticipate their movements. It is now evident that the Allies were privy to their orders before they themselves received them. Admiral Dönitz's reaction was intricate. In his hurried response to Winterbotham's publisher, he expressed a long-held suspicion of compromised communications. This claim, however, conflicted with his war diary, post-war memoirs, and testimonies from subordinates who attested to his unwavering faith in the Enigma machine throughout World War II. The psychological need to retroactively assert doubt highlighted the profound impact on professional pride. The most dramatic confrontation occurred at a 1978 intelligence history conference held by the German Marine Institute, marking the first public meeting between former adversaries. British cryptanalysts from Bletchley Park and German intelligence officers who had used Enigma systems gathered to discuss their wartime experiences. The keynote session featured Harry Hinsley, a former analyst at Bletchley Park and official historian of British intelligence, alongside Wilhelm Trano and other veterans from the B-Dienst unit. During his presentation, Hinsley meticulously dismantled every German assumption about wartime security by showing decrypted messages, explaining cryptanalytic methods, and revealing the extent of Allied code-breaking operations. The German response was a mix of professional respect and personal distress. Trano remained composed but asked technical questions about British decryption techniques, clearly impressed by their mathematical sophistication. However, when the conversation turned to operational consequences, emotions flared. A particularly heated exchange occurred when Otto Kretschmer, Germany's most successful U-boat commander, confronted former Donut staff officers who were still defending wartime decisions. When they invoked the steamroller theory, that German strategy aimed at exhausting Allied resources regardless of intelligence, Kretschmer vehemently disagreed. Steamroller. We sent men to their deaths in operations that the enemy knew about beforehand. Every patrol order, every tactical innovation, every desperate attempt to shift the tide, all known by them. And you still defend this as a strategy? The near-physical altercation was averted by the intervention of conference organizers, but Kretschmer's outburst resonated with many German veterans. Their sense of betrayal did not come from adversaries, but rather from their leadership's failure to recognize the potential for cryptographic breaches. In the years that followed the unveiling of Ultra, German cryptographers undertook extensive analyses to determine why Enigma had failed. The findings were both comforting and unsettling. While the encryption system itself remained mathematically robust, human errors introduced critical vulnerabilities. In 1932, Polish cryptologists capitalized on a procedural flaw in the Germans' protocol. Specifically, they transmitted each message with the key indicator twice at the start, which unintentionally revealed the internal wiring of Enigma's rotors through permutation group theory. By the time the Germans rectified this issue in 1940, The Poles had already shared their insights with British intelligence. Building upon Polish work, the British achieved significant breakthroughs through substantial technological advancements. Turing and Welchman's bomb machines hinged on a crucial feature of Enigma. No letter could encrypt to itself. These devices tested various rotor configurations against known or guessed plaintext segments, cribs, at lightning speed, swiftly eliminating improbable settings. German security measures, although intricate, inadvertently facilitated British cryptanalysis efforts. Restrictions like avoiding the repetition of rotor settings from day to day helped narrow down potential configurations for analysts, while strict formatting requirements in military messages provided predictable crib opportunities. Most troubling was the poor operational security practices that led Germans to transmit sensitive information via Enigma, even when it was available through less secure channels. For instance, after Bletchley Park cracked British convoy codes, German U-boat headquarters would broadcast such details through Enigma, giving British cryptographers invaluable clues. Military scholars have long debated Ultra's impact on the course of World War II. Sahari Hinsley's official evaluation that Ultra shortened the war by at least 2 years, and potentially up to 4, has gained widespread acceptance. However, its ramifications extend far beyond mere timeframes. Ultra fundamentally transformed the essence of warfare. For the first time in history, one side could consistently decipher its adversary's most confidential communications almost instantaneously. This was more than just a tactical edge. It was strategic omniscience. Starting from 1941, every German offensive encountered opponents who were well informed about their plans, strength, and often specific objectives days or weeks in advance. The Battle of the Atlantic serves as the clearest indicator of Ultra's impact. Historical estimates suggest that Ultra intelligence saved between 300 and 500 merchant ships, approximately 1.5 to 2 million tons of shipping. Without these gains, Britain would have faced severe shortages by mid-Minus 1941. The ability to reroute convoys around wolf packs was crucial for British survival against German victory. In North Africa, Ultra-intelligence enabled Montgomery to engage in the Battle of Alam el Hafa with comprehensive knowledge of Rommel's plans. By positioning his forces precisely where Rommel intended to attack, he created killing fields that destroyed German armor before it could maneuver effectively. At Alamein, Montgomery had detailed information on German fuel supplies, tank strength, and defensive positions down to individual vehicles. The success of the Normandy invasions was partly due to Ultra's revelation of what German commanders believed. Every intelligence assessment concluding the invasion would come at Calais was intercepted by Allied planners who adjusted their deception operations accordingly. Orders for German reinforcements were known before local commanders received them, allowing Allied forces to intercept enemy units before they could reach the front. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of Germany's ignorance about Ultra was the human toll it exacted. Hundreds of thousands of German servicemen perished in doomed missions whose orders had been decrypted prior to their receipt. U-boat crews suffered disproportionately high casualties, with 75% losses among the 40,000 men who served. They navigated into combat zones where Allied forces were fully aware of their precise locations, fuel levels, torpedo counts, and intended targets. Despite facing overwhelming odds with remarkable courage, they remained unaware that their adversaries could decipher their plans. Luftwaffe pilots repeatedly encountered carefully planned ambushes set days in advance. Transport aircraft delivering vital supplies to besieged troops faced interception so frequently that crew members referred to themselves as flying coffins. Fighter units observed Allied bombers consistently evading their patrol zones while targeting undefended locations, not by chance, but through decoded orders. German soldiers engaged in battles where the enemy had detailed knowledge of their strengths, objectives, and attack times. The decimation of entire divisions in Tunisia, the crumbling of meticulously constructed defensive lines in Italy, and the failure of every significant counteroffensive from Kursk to the Ardennes were all influenced by Allied access to ultra-intelligence. When German military professionals learned about Ultra in 1974, it had a profound psychological impact on them. Their understanding of the war needed to be entirely reevaluated. Defeats previously attributed to inferior resources or tactical blunders were now seen as failures of intelligence. Heroes who perished making desperate assaults were revealed to have been leading attacks into traps set by enemies reading their orders. General Heinz Guderian, a pioneer in blitzkrieg warfare, wrote about his realization in a letter discovered after his death. Learning about Ultra was akin to finding out that life is an acted-out play where everyone knows the script except you. Every decision I made, every order I issued, every plan I devised, the enemy had complete knowledge of it all. We were not generals commanding armies. We were actors performing for an audience aware of our every move. Admiral Dönitz, who lived until 1980, found his later years deeply affected by this revelation. His associates noted he became increasingly isolated, spending hours reanalyzing past battles with the knowledge that his communications had been compromised. In his unpublished final manuscript, it was said to contain extensive revisions to his understanding of the U-boat war, acknowledging that no amount of submarines or tactical ingenuity could have succeeded against an enemy reading every order. The psychological ramifications extended beyond military leaders to ordinary veterans as well. U-boat survivors formed support groups to process the realization that their service had been doomed by communications intelligence rather than operational failures. Luftwaffe pilots reevaluated the reasons behind their frequent numerical disadvantage during critical interception missions. Wehrmacht veterans acknowledged that their efforts were amplified by intelligence lapses at the highest echelons. The inability of German forces to detect the compromise of Enigma highlights significant lessons about institutional myopia and the risks associated with unwavering certainty. Despite the intricate, meticulous nature of the Wehrmacht's investigative apparatus, staffed by astute professionals dedicated to their work, these efforts were in vain due to an inability to challenge core assumptions. Each investigation began under the assumption that Enigma was impervious to decryption, leading investigators to interpret evidence through this restrictive lens and discard any findings that contradicted it. When multiple supply vessels were destroyed at distant coordinates, investigators sought explanations involving spies or advanced radar technology rather than considering a breach in communication security. Similarly, when convoys consistently evaded U-boat wolf packs, the blame was placed on Allied air superiority instead of questioning whether patrol positions had been compromised beforehand. The very compartmentalization that safeguarded Enigma also hindered a thorough examination of its overall security. Cryptographers assured operators with mathematical proofs that the system was unbreakable, while operators in turn reassured commanders that procedures were strictly adhered to, and commanders reported back to high command that security was intact. No one was tasked with scrutinizing the entire system, and those who dared faced institutional resistance to deviating from the norm. The Germans' technical pride became a liability. Their confidence in their superior engineering and mathematical prowess created blind spots. When evidence suggested otherwise, such as convoys evading with near-perfect precision or supply ships being intercepted at remote locations, the response was to search for more intricate explanations rather than considering that Allied cryptanalysts might possess advanced capabilities. Throughout the war, Germans received warnings they consistently overlooked or misinterpreted, each one representing a missed opportunity to uncover the truth obscured by institutional blindness. For instance, in February 1942, the German naval attaché in Tokyo reported that the U.S. Navy appeared to have prior knowledge of Japanese operations. The Germans viewed this as an attempt by the Japanese to deflect blame for their setbacks in the Pacific, without contemplating the possibility that if American forces were decoding Japanese communications, they might also be deciphering German ones. In August 1943, Swiss intelligence issued a clear warning. German naval codes had been compromised. Instead of investigating the validity of this information, the Germans focused on tracing the source of the Swiss intel, concluding it was disinformation from Allied intelligence agencies rather than recognizing that neutral observers like the Swiss had simply noticed patterns indicative of Allied foreknowledge. Within the ranks of German intelligence services, any suspicions were systematically squashed. When Lieutenant Friedrich, an analyst at B. Dienz, identified statistical anomalies in convoy routing, his report was shelved with a remark suggesting that mathematical analysis alone couldn't pinpoint the source of such discrepancies. Similarly, when U-boat commanders reported that Allied convoys seemed to predict their positions accurately, they were advised to tighten radio discipline instead of questioning whether their communications might be intercepted. The most ironic aspect of the Enigma saga is the success achieved by German analysts at B. Dienz. Despite the compromise of the Enigma system, these analysts managed to crack numerous Allied codes throughout the war, including British convoy codes and Soviet military transmissions. This accomplishment should have taught them that codes could be broken and that communication security was always vulnerable. Instead, their triumph reinforced a false sense of invulnerability. German cryptanalysts were well aware of the immense effort required to break codes and recognized how often such attempts failed. They assumed that if breaking Allied codes proved so challenging for them despite substantial resources, it must pose an even greater hurdle for the Allies in attempting to decipher the superior Enigma system. The success Wilhelm Trano had with reading British convoy codes led him to believe he fully understood the limitations of cryptanalysis. He knew that even with captured codebooks, continuous access required constant effort and frequent setbacks whenever codes were changed. He couldn't fathom that the Allies had industrialized cryptanalysis, transforming it from an art into a science and turning individual brilliance into mass production. The tactical victories achieved by U-boat commanders ultimately led to strategic defeats. Decoding convoy codes enabled precise positioning of wolf packs, but these positions were then transmitted via Enigma machines back to the U-boats, giving Bletchley Park perfect cribs for decryption. German successes in tactical intelligence actually hastened their downfall at the strategic level. After Ultra's exposure in 1974, German military historians conducted thorough reassessments of World War II operations. These reassessments were highly damaging to conventional narratives about German military prowess and Allied material superiority. Defeats in North Africa, previously attributed to supply problems and numerical disadvantages for the Axis powers, were shown to be a result of Allied intelligence operations. Rommel's supplies were intercepted because the Allies knew precisely when and where his resupply ships would arrive. His tactical innovations proved futile as Montgomery was always one step ahead, aware of his plans before German commanders received them. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, was reevaluated with ultra-intelligence in mind. Soviet forces were privy to the exact timing, strength, and objectives of the German offensive weeks beforehand. What had been perceived as excellent Soviet defensive preparations was now understood to be a result of British-supplied ultra-intelligence, passed through the Lucy spy network in Switzerland. The failure of the Atlantic Wall during D-Day operations wasn't due to Allied material superiority, but because every detail of its defenses and weaknesses were known by the Allies. Rommel's fortifications, runways, reserve positions, and Hitler's strategic assumptions were all transparent to an enemy that could read their most confidential communications. The Atlantic Wall didn't collapse under the weight of Allied military might. It fell because its vulnerabilities had been thoroughly exploited. Even German victories required reevaluation. The early success of the Ardennes offensive in December 1944 was partly due to poor weather conditions, which prevented ultra-intelligence from reaching forward commanders promptly. Once communications resumed and the skies cleared, Allied forces could accurately predict where German spearheads would strike and position their reserves accordingly. As the 1970s advanced, elderly German intelligence officials who had knowledge of Ultra provided crucial testimonies about their wartime oversight. These recollections, gathered by historians before these individuals could no longer communicate them, provide distinct insights into the psychology behind intelligence failures. In a 1979 interview, Heinz Bonatz, former head of B-Dienst, stated, "We were too clever for our own good. Our expertise in cryptanalysis was so profound that we believed no one could surpass us. Patterns indicating potential breaches were identified but dismissed with increasingly convoluted explanations. The reality that our communications were being intercepted was simply too disturbing to consider." Dr. Erich Huttenheim, the chief cryptanalyst of the Wehrmacht, reflected on this matter in 1976. The mathematics was sound. Enigma seemed unbreakable given the computational resources we envisioned. We did not anticipate that the British would dedicate thousands of people and millions of pounds to cracking our codes. Our mindset was that of engineers rather than desperate adversaries struggling for survival. Otto Kretschmer, a legendary U-boat commander who survived his capture in 1941, offered one of the most poignant reflections. "We ventured into battle believing ourselves to be warriors, when in truth we were victims of our leader's blindness. Each patrol was compromised before it even began, and every tactical advancement was known by the enemy prior to its implementation. We fought with courage against an insurmountable mathematical certainty." The descendants of World War II German veterans were confronted with a new reality following the revelation of Ultra. Many had been raised on tales of heroic struggle against immense odds. When they learned that their ancestors had been systematically misled by failures at the highest echelons of German intelligence, it evoked a range of complex emotions. Hans-Peter Dönitz, grandson of an admiral, detailed this in his 2003 memoir. "My grandfather believed until the end that he had done everything possible to secure victory in the Battle of the Atlantic." The discovery of Ultra compelled our family to reassess this narrative. It revealed how his most significant innovation, centralized control via radio communications, ultimately led to his fleet's downfall. He was not a fool, but was deceived by his own conviction. Veterans organizations grappled with these implications during the 1970s and 1980s through special sessions where historians explained Ultra's impact on the Battle of the Atlantic. Many veterans initially rejected this information, unable to accept that their sacrifices had been magnified by intelligence failures. Others found a strange solace in knowing that their defeats were not due to personal shortcomings, but systemic compromises at the highest levels. The story of Enigma's compromise profoundly influenced post-war German cryptographic development. When the Bundeswehr was established in 1955, it implemented communication security protocols designed to prevent another Enigma-style intelligence disaster. Cryptographers abandoned the notion of unbreakable codes and instead assumed that all communications could potentially be intercepted. with defensive measures adapted accordingly. Multiple encryption systems were employed simultaneously, and critical information was dispersed across various channels. Radio silence became standard practice except when absolutely necessary, reversing the Wehrmacht's reliance on constant communication. The psychological impact on German intelligence services endured for decades. The BND, West Germany's intelligence agency, operated with almost paranoid levels of security, sometimes hampering operations through excessive caution. This trauma fostered an institutional culture that assumed compromise rather than invincibility. After Ultra's disclosure, professional military historians devoted the ensuing decades to reevaluating World War II's European theater extensively. Battles previously scrutinized for tactical insights now demanded a fresh perspective, given that one side enjoyed sustained intelligence superiority throughout. The operational prowess of the German General Staff seemed less remarkable when it was clear their adversaries had access to their plans in advance. Early victories achieved by the Wehrmacht from 1939 to 1941, before Ultra came into play, stood in sharp contrast to subsequent defeats from 1942 to 1945, following Enigma's decryption. German commanders also needed re-examination. Rommel's reputation as the Desert Fox endured somewhat intact, with his tactical acumen surviving even when strategic advantages were compromised by ultra-intelligence. However, other figures like Dönitz suffered a decline in their historical stature. Once praised innovations and centralized command tactics turned out to be significant weaknesses that hastened defeat. Allied commanders likewise faced reappraisal. Montgomery's cautious approach at El Alamein appeared more prudent when his possession of comprehensive German position and strength intelligence was taken into account. Similarly, Eisenhower's broad front strategy seemed more sensible given Ultra's revelations about German reserves and intentions. What often seemed like strategic brilliance frequently derived from the advantage of superior intelligence. Despite extensive post-war analysis, a persistent puzzle remains. How did capable and occasionally brilliant German intelligence fail to detect Enigma's compromise despite clear indications? The explanation lies not in individual failures, but in systemic blindness fostered by several reinforcing factors. Certainty based on computational capabilities became an unshakable dogma. Technical pride hindered recognition of Allied superiority. Institutional inertia stifled dissenting views, while compartmentalization prevented a thorough examination of intelligence vulnerabilities. Alternative explanations, even if improbable, appeared more reasonable than accepting a complete breach in communications security. At its core, the psychological burden of acknowledging Enigma's compromise would have been intolerable. It implied that every operational strategy was known to the adversary. Each tactical innovation would be compromised before it could be put into action, and orders sent thousands of soldiers to certain death. The human psyche recoils from such horrifying knowledge, preferring any alternative explanation over facing a systematic and comprehensive failure. In 1979, 5 years after the disclosure of Ultra and 1 year before his passing, Admiral Karl Dönitz gave his final interview about the intelligence failure that had destroyed his submarine fleet. At 88 years old, the last Führer of the Third Reich had spent half a decade grappling with the knowledge that every command issued was transparent to his enemies. "You ask if I suspected it," he said in a voice still tinged with Prussian authority. "Of course we all suspected something. Suspecting an enemy's advantage is sound military judgment, but knowing your thoughts are always revealed is madness." He paused, gazing out the window of his Almüller apartment at the tranquil German countryside, so different from the Atlantic battlefield where his men had perished. Could we have changed the course of events if we had known? By 1941, when Enigma was fully compromised, the war's outcome was already decided. But we might have lost differently. We could have saved lives by adjusting our tactics, adopting defensive positions, and accepting reality rather than battling phantoms. The greatest tragedy, he concluded, was not that we lost, but that we never truly understood why. We attributed our defeat to technology, resources, air power, everything except the truth. 30,000 of my soldiers perished in submarine warfare. Many fell during missions where the adversary was already aware of our plans before we could act. They fought valiantly against an enemy who seemed to anticipate every move. His last message on Ultra echoed his profound realization from hard-earned experience. In conflict, one's most formidable foe is often not the opposing army, but their own unwavering conviction. We were convinced that Enigma was invulnerable. This assurance led to more casualties among my troops than all the depth charges and aircraft in the Allied forces combined. The true toll of Enigma's influence can be quantified through chilling statistics, highlighting the extent of German ignorance. Over 100,000 Enigma machines were manufactured between 1920 and 1945. The three-rotor version had an astounding 159 quintillion possible settings, while the four-rotor Naval M4 variant boasted 10 to the 23rd power permutations. Daily key changes necessitated solving new puzzles every 24 hours. With more than 1,200 distinct radio networks utilizing different Enigma keys by 1944. The breaking of Enigma began in December 1932 when the Polish Cipher Bureau made initial breakthroughs. Bletchley Park became operational in August 1939 and reached a peak staff of 9,000 personnel by January 1945, with 80% being women. By war's end, 200 bomb machines were active, along with 10 Colossus computers, the world's first programmable electronic devices. In terms of daily intercept capacity, over 5,000 messages could be decoded by 1944, with an average turnaround time from interception to intelligence delivery cut down to just 2.5 hours by 1945. German losses attributed to Ultra include the sinking of 783 U-boats out of 1,162 commissioned, a staggering loss rate of 67.4%. Around 30,000 submarine personnel perished from a total of 40,000 who served, resulting in a casualty rate of 75%. In May 1943 alone, 41 U-boats were lost during what became known as Black May. Thanks to Ultra's insights, Allied shipping losses were reduced by over 14.67 million tons through improved convoy routing, and an estimated 500 merchant ships were saved by evasive maneuvers based on intercepted intelligence. The decoding efforts also contributed to the destruction of approximately 76,875 Luftwaffe aircraft. In 1943, a record-breaking 237 U-boats were lost due to the Allies' ultra-effective operations. During this period from 1941 to 1945, there were at least 15 significant German security investigations that failed to yield results. Additionally, 3 separate attempts by the B-Dienst to crack their naval Enigma codes all ended in failure. 5 alternative theories were explored, such as radar, infrared, direction-finding spies, and traitors, but none seriously considered an Enigma breach. A single warning from Swiss intelligence in August 1943 was disregarded. Internal suspicions at various command levels were systematically suppressed. Following the war, a veil of secrecy persisted for 3 decades, from 1945 to 1974, as over 10,000 Bletchley Park personnel maintained silence about their work. This period necessitated numerous revisions in historical accounts. According to official historians, The war could have been shortened by 2 to 4 years had these issues been addressed differently. Thousands of German veterans were compelled to reassess their wartime experiences. The tale of Germany's blindness regarding Enigma compromises serves as a timeless cautionary lesson about the perils of unwavering certainty in intelligence and security matters. It illustrates how even competent, intelligent professionals can overlook clear evidence when institutional biases reinforce comfortable assumptions. Today, modern intelligence agencies study this failure as a critical case study on cognitive bias and security paradigms. The U.S. National Security Agency incorporates it into training programs about such biases, while the British GCHQ uses it to teach the significance of questioning foundational premises. Around the world, military academies dissect this episode as the ultimate instance of intelligence failure despite abundant evidence. It is clear that the German blunder was not a result of technological inferiority. Their cryptographic mathematics were robust and sound. Nor did procedural flaws cause the problem. Their security measures were intricate and generally well managed. Moreover, it wasn't an intellectual oversight. German cryptanalysts were among the world's top experts. The real failure lay in psychological and institutional factors that blinded them to evident truths. The failure to question basic assumptions, even as evidence mounted against them, continues to resonate in today's world of cyber warfare and electronic surveillance. In an era where every system is presumed secure, every communication is thought to be private, and every encryption method is deemed unbreakable, it is crucial to remain vigilant and skeptical. The Germans' unwavering faith in Enigma led to the deaths of thousands and prolonged a war that could have been shortened. Similar overconfidence in modern security systems could result in equally disastrous outcomes. Today, Bletchley Park serves as a museum commemorating one of history's most significant intelligence achievements and Germany's monumental failure. The huts where young individuals cracked supposedly unbreakable codes are preserved, along with reconstructed bomber machines. Decades after the end of the war, the story is finally being told openly. Visitors walk through spaces that showcase the remarkable blend of mathematical brilliance and organizational prowess used to achieve what German experts deemed impossible. They witness the cramped quarters in which thousands worked under strict secrecy, aware they possessed information critical for winning the war, but unable to share it even with their loved ones. They learn how an eclectic group of mathematicians, linguists, chess players, and crossword enthusiasts transformed cryptanalysis into a systematic discipline that revolutionized warfare forever. Perhaps the most impactful exhibit is the four-rotor Naval Enigma machine captured from U-505 and displayed in full working order. Visitors can watch as messages are encoded, observing the precise movements of the rotors and lights illuminating with each keystroke. This mechanical perfection once convinced German cryptographers of absolute security, but was ultimately cracked by determined adversaries with the right resources and ingenuity. The machine symbolizes a fundamental truth. The greatest peril does not stem from what we do not know, but rather from our certainty about things that prove to be incorrect. The Germans were confident in Enigma's invincibility, and this unwarranted assurance contributed more than any Allied weapon or strategy did toward their ultimate defeat. Among the thousands of entries in Bletchley Park's guest book, one entry written in 1995 in neat German script stands out. It reads, "My grandfather commanded UX 104 and perished with his crew in August 1943. For half a century, I believed he died due to superior Allied technology. Now I realize that his demise was because the enemy intercepted his orders before he received them. The tragedy is not Germany's defeat, but our ignorance of it for so long. Those at Bletchley Park deserve respect, and their work with Enigma warrants continuous remembrance. signed simply as a German grandson who finally understands. This entry underscores the fragility of certainty and the peril of institutional blind spots. The narrative of how Germans remained unaware that the Allies had cracked Enigma reveals the dangers inherent in unwavering conviction about one's own security. It serves as a reminder that, whether in intelligence operations, warfare, or life, our most dangerous adversary can be our unchallenged certainty regarding what we think is true. The 30,000 German submariners who lost their lives under the Atlantic, along with thousands of Luftwaffe pilots shot down by enemies who knew their positions and movements, exemplify victims not only of war, but also of a critical intelligence failure. The secret of Ultra remained undisclosed for 3 decades after the conflict ended. Yet the deeper truth about how German confidence in their secure communications led them to overlook evident vulnerabilities offers enduring lessons. Enigma, once celebrated as the pinnacle of German cryptographic prowess, now serves as history's foremost testament to the perils of absolute certainty in an uncertain world. The Germans never knew that their secrets were compromised despite overwhelming evidence pointing otherwise. This persistent ignorance represents one of the most significant intelligence failures ever recorded. In essence, the Allies not only deciphered Enigma, but did so while preserving such impeccable secrecy that the enemy remained oblivious to their decrypted communications. This triumph, sustained by the silence of countless individuals and the meticulous orchestration of deception, stands as perhaps the greatest intelligence victory in military history. The story concludes where it began, with an elderly admiral holding a book that exposed truths undermining everything he had believed about his wartime losses. In 1974, Karl Dönitz's stunned silence was not merely for the men lost, but also for the war that was destined to fail from its inception due to Enigma's breach. The quiet acknowledged a shared understanding. The very essence of certainty turned out to be the adversary, and in both conflict and everyday existence, our ignorance about what remains unknown can be far more devastating than facing a visible foe.